but I'll get the instructions anyways. Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members of the commission, if you're able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video as you're speaking. In this meeting, panelists have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Panelists also have the ability to add pronouns after their names if they choose. Please do not alter the current naming conventions. Simply add text after your name. Please use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Staff, please use the raise hand feature when you're asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on commission members in the order in which hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. Staff will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair Goodhart, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to disclosures and recusals. None, seeing none, then we can move on to number one, general public comment. I see no registration for any general public comment. So we can just jump right into the agenda overview.
Sure. Good evening. Thank you, Chair. We have two items on the agenda this evening. Item number one has been withdrawn by the applicant. They will be pursuing a more permanent sign option, so we may see that come back to us at a later date, but they did withdraw the current application, so we will not be taking that up this evening. Item number two is an informational presentation for 2165 Linden Street. The proposal is for the development of a 3-story residential building with 32 units. As part of the application, the applicant is requesting a rezoning to plan development. The UDC is an advisory body on plan development requests. With that, I'm going to hand this one over to Kevin, who will remain the face of the project as it does travel through the entitlement process.
And I would just note on this item that there are several pieces of public comment that have come in. So please, Urban Design Commissioners, please make sure that you've seen that in Legistar. And I'll be available to answer questions after the public comments.
Okay, great. So we'll start with our presentation by the applicant and their representatives, and then we'll move directly into any public comment who have registered to speak, and everybody will be treated equally with 3 minutes to say their piece.
Kevin Burrow will be presenting the project tonight.
All right, good evening. This is Kevin Burrow with Knoth and Bruce Architects. I appreciate your time this afternoon as we present this redevelopment of the current Zion Faith Community Church property, which is shown on the screen here. It's directly north of a 4-story apartment building called the Cornerstone that we developed about 5 or 6 years ago. If we can go to the next slide, please. Here's an axonometric view to try and set the stage for where this building is being located. As you can see, it's the area outlined in yellow, and we do butt up against the 4-story apartment building called the Cornerstone, where Barrique's occupies the first floor, and then all the commercial space that fronts along Atwood Avenue as well. And then we do realize the sensitivity of this site in that we are surrounded by residential properties as well, but it's a combination of commercial and residential on this entire block. You can go to the next slide. Here's our site plan layout. So after the church building has been removed, we're looking at doing a 2 transitioning to a 3-story apartment building. We will be utilizing the shared access easement that already exists to the south of the property to have direct access into our basement level parking. And because of the terrain and topography of the site, we're able to basically enter at grade on the existing drive into our basement level. And the building itself is simply raised up above the sidewalk level by about 3 or 4 feet, so that it sits up traditionally to what a house would be sitting out of the ground. As you can see, we are developing landscaping on all sides of the building and providing access for the apartments that have access on first floor for direct entry into their apartment units. The main entry is located on the east side of the site, where we have a large stair access up to the main entry and then also a handicap ramp access further north towards Linden Avenue. If we go to the next slide, please. The basement level contains enclosed parking. We have 42 parking stalls for the 32 units. We're actually achieving this by being able to do stacked parking for the 2-bedroom units, such that those residents could have 2 vehicles and they coordinate amongst themselves for which vehicle is stacked above the other. But we are able to achieve a 1-to-1 parking stall per bedroom in this 32-unit building. Next slide, please. First floor has the entry over on the right-hand side, as was mentioned earlier. And then we've also got our community room and exercise room on the first floor. And then it's a mixture of studios, 1s, and 2-bedroom apartments. If you go to the next slide, please. Second floor, again, is a mixture of the apartments. And then next slide. For third floor, you can see we are stepping the building back on all exposed facades of the building to reduce the overall mass along the sidewalk. So it transitions from 2 up to 3 stories. You go to the next slide, please. We've put together several renderings of this. You can see it in context to the cornerstone building on the left-hand side, and you can see the shared access drive down the middle of the screen there. And then you can also are seeing the main entry to the building here at this corner. Next slide. Here's another view now at the corner of Linden Avenue here, where you can see what we've created is a townhome style feel for this building, where we're creating these 2-story elements in character to try to fit in best with the neighborhood in this context. And then you can see that the third floor has been recessed back. Next slide, please. Here's another view looking down Linden. Again, the character we're trying to achieve here is sort of a row house, townhouse type feel with individual entries, front porches, et cetera. And then we have the main stair exits also highlighted in these arched brick elements to designate where residents' common area access could be obtained as well. Next slide. Here's another view looking down Linden. Go to the next slide. Here's the end view again, now looking off the other side, basically where you can see how the building is raised up due to the topography of this property, but we still are maintaining direct entry even to these end units. Next slide. And then here's a final view looking back at the building. And again, the building does step back on all sides, so it appears as a 2-story element to try and be in more scale and character to the neighborhood. Next slide. We have put together an exterior materials board as well. It's a combination of 2 masonry elements to designate different colors of brick, and then also some siding elements and accents that work well as a palette, but do create the individual feel of these 2-story elements for each stack of units. So with that, I will open it up to any questions or comments.
Is there anyone else from the development team going to speak to the project?
We have
Yes.
Tyler Krupp registered and also Ed Niles registered in support wishing to speak.
Okay, so that last one was 4.5 minutes, Kevin, just for when you practice, when you come in for the final approval.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so was it Tyler Krupp then?
Correct.
Okay. Anytime you're ready.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I believe I sent a presentation too, if you could pull that up.
Let me just check. I had Kevin's presentation. Julie, do you have this presentation? Because I only had Kevin's.
Yep, I had sent it to you a while ago.
Oh, okay.
I can resend it if you like.
1 second.
If you don't have it, Kevin, I can talk it through without it.
Just take 1 second and I'll have it up and running. I'm sorry, I am not seeing this presentation. Julie, do you have it handy, or could you?
I can pull it
Let
up
me
too, Kevin.
Pull it up.
Okay.
Got it, Julie?
If you could pull it up, Jess, that'd be good. I'm reconnecting.
All right, I have it up. I share my screen. Can everybody see?
Yeah, we have it now.
Okay.
Okay, anytime you're ready.
Are you able to enlarge that at all or no?
Why don't you go ahead and start then?
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my name is Tyler Krupp. I'm registered in support of this project. I'm registered in two different capacities. One, I'm actually a neighbor. I'm a renter right across the street, and I support it as a neighbor. Probably more relevant though, I'm the applicant on this project. I work with Joe Krupp at Threshold Development. I thought because it's such an unusual project that I'd give you a little context for how we ended up at the design. I'll also be available afterwards to answer questions. So this project came to us about a year and a half ago. Zion Faith Community approached us. They had tried to do two different affordable housing projects on the site, and it had fallen through. They were needing to kind of move on. They couldn't afford the building anymore and needed sort of a solution to get out of it. We've done a lot of work in the neighborhood, so we took it on. We knew it was unusual, some unusual zoning issues underlying the project, but the background is we wanted to do owner-occupied condo projects. There were some 3 or 4 people we knew who wanted to own in the neighborhood, and we took it on under that intention. We proposed initially a 4-story condo project, kind of contemporary architecture, stepping down to 3 stories. Initial feedback we got from a large neighborhood group, maybe 70, 80 people, was that the scale was too large and the architecture was out of place in the neighborhood. Initially, our ingress to the underground parking was on Division Street, and there were a lot of concerns about safety, so that we were asked to reconsider scale, architecture, and access. So we came back with this next one here. We're calling the City Row proposal. It's actually a project that Kevin Burrows designed and Krupp Construction built, so we were familiar with it. People like the architecture, kind of the gable roof, townhouse feel. We came back with this proposal. It did entail a decrease in density, so we felt like we really couldn't make sense of a condo project with the lesser density, so we proposed a rental project. I could go into details for the reasoning behind that, but we ended up with this 3-story rental project. We did move the underground parking access back onto the shared easement with Cornerstone. The feedback we got this time was from a smaller neighborhood group that emerged kind of in the interim, called themselves the core group. It was about 8-10 people. And they told us they liked the architecture. They weren't wild about the rental, but they were, I would say, neutral. They were really happy with the new access point with the shared easement. The main feedback we got, though, was that the height of this building, because of the gabled roof, was still too tall. Was coming in about the same height as Cornerstone or the church. So we went back and thought through whether we could even do a project that was less dense, and decided we were kind of right at the edge of what made sense for us, especially given underground parking costs and construction costs, and came back with 2 proposals that we were willing to execute. At the bottom there, called Proposal A, Proposal B. Proposal A was a 3-story flat roof, same density as the City Row proposal. And we were proposing to do a passive house construction on it. Can talk more about what that is, but highly efficient, green, potentially net zero with solar on the roof. And we simultaneously knew maybe this was still too dense for the neighborhood, so we gave them this option B, called Proposal B there, which is a 3-story stepping down to 2.
Okay, that was 3 minutes and 50 seconds. So we will ask for the next registrant, please.
It would be Ed Niles.
Thanks. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yep, go right ahead.
So I'm just a neighbor who's registered in support of the project. I guess I'll keep the comments fairly simple. These are my comments. Obviously, there's a number of neighbors in support who have written comments that have been submitted to the committee. I think it's a fantastic project. It's pretty well thought out. They've got reasonably interesting architecture here in a townhouse style that integrates well into the surroundings. And the plan really was developed with really significant neighborhood input. My wife and I live less than a block away, and we really can't wait to welcome our new neighbors here. So we wholeheartedly encourage you to move forward on the project and the plan development with all haste. Just a main point here, I don't need to remind the committee that the city faces a pretty massive deficit in housing supply. The East Side, 53704 in particular, has seen massive increases in home prices over the past couple of years. And if we look at days on market, especially for units under $500,000, Sassy might be the neighborhood with the worst mismatch between demand and supply. I don't have any good stats on the rental side, but anecdotally with the rent increases, I assume it's just as tight there. So we need to support this type of smart infill development, especially where it increases density and adds to the housing supply in the neighborhood before this place becomes any more of a gentrification trap. If anything, I would personally like to see something larger here, closer to what they originally proposed. And when an underutilized parcel comes up, this type of development seems ideal, especially in a neighborhood where we've invested as a city in, future BRT and bike infrastructure, things that reduce road use. It's a highly walkable neighborhood. So I suspect you're going to hear from people who oppose the project today. They're likely also going to share their personal thoughts about what might be a better parcel. But as I've noted here, I've also got a personal opinion, and none of us have a personal or financial stake in the property or the project at hand. We're not really offering a realistic alternative. Threshold Development has really put toward a good project design for the site. They went through 6 months of discussions with the neighborhoods, patiently seeking input. And so, as I said at the beginning, I'm a nearby neighbor. I wholeheartedly endorse moving the project forward with all haste. And this is really exactly the type of developer engagement and smart development that the UDC and the city should be encouraging. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ed Niles? Okay. Thank you.
I will note that we have 4 people registered in opposition willing to answer questions, and we have 8 people registered in opposition but not wishing to speak.
Okay.
So now we'll move on to those registered in opposition and wishing to speak. We'll start with Susan Dettering, to be followed by Ann Reynolds.
Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you. I am registered in opposition to this project. Initially, with the original presentation from CREP, I was on board, super excited for a condo development in the neighborhood and willing to forgive a lot of the design elements that are not compatible at all with the neighborhood plan or the zoning as it is. We do have a housing crisis in Madison. We do want to do infill projects, but we also need to create opportunities for generational wealth and diversity in neighborhoods. And condos are desperately lacking in the real estate landscape here. I do work as a realtor. I can tell you how many people we could fill that building in a day. And it offers an alternative to the $450,000 to $500,000 average home price in Sassy right now. So I can't advocate highly enough for that. And I do think that the new initiatives on the zoning level are great, allowing for these opportunities, but it doesn't do anything for the Zion Church's initial attempts back in 2017 to develop this lot, where they were unanimously rejected for any PD application and given a occupancy limit. I would love to revisit the past, even though I know there's a deal on the table with CREP presently. And I really think the city could use this as an opportunity for land banking and a request for proposals from nonprofit developers and really set a standard for a city that cares about the investment of the citizenry and density simultaneously, building a future for everyone in the developed corridors. Sassy is amazing because we have a grocery store and we have a bookstore and we have access to libraries and buses and community centers. And that should be given to every citizen, not just the ones who can afford market rent. That is the primary reason I'm in opposition of this project. Otherwise, I could be on board. I would like to see more open space. I would like to see trees being taken into account. One of the nicest things about our neighborhood is our teeny front yards and how much we inhabit them. This project is sorely lacking that. But for the right reasons, I think as a neighbor, I could get on board. But for another market rental place, I really have to stand in opposition. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We do not judge the ownership model for the building, just the building design, but thank you anyway. Next.
Ann Reynolds, to be followed by Thomas Liebel.
Yes, hi. Thank you, members of the commission. I live at 2139 Linden Avenue, which is about a half a block from the church. And I helped write that letter that you received in the comments that was signed by 20 of my neighbors. First of all, I just want to say that I think we would be having a really different conversation if this was an application for a really innovative project with affordable housing, as the previous speaker mentioned, and positive environmental features that benefit the entire community. But since this is a very standard proposal, I want to focus my brief comment on the issue of adequacy of usable open space in the natural environment. This proposal offers our neighborhood a building that covers 74% of the half-acre lot. The developers propose 3,700 square feet of usable open space, with 52% of that space in private porches. There will be 30 units, 10 of them 2-bedroom and 22 1-bedroom. If these 32 units were built on lots under our updated TRV1 zoning, I calculate that the usable open space requirement would be over 5,000 square feet. A lot of people will be living on this site with open space that is well below the current zoning standards for the block. Usable open space is defined in the statutes as a combination of structured and natural space. One of the key elements of the natural space as an environmentally sustainable community is shade trees, especially as the climate changes. Street trees in our neighborhood are under stress, as demonstrated in the forestry report that was attached to this agenda. Tall trees on private land have a significant role in mitigating the lack of city-owned street shade trees in this area. Quick look at the Zion parcel through Google Earth shows numerous surrounding privately owned overstory trees in the front and backyards of both single and multifamily house buildings. The entire community benefits from any single tree on a property. There are no overstory trees and no tall evergreens included in the proposed landscape plan, only ornamental trees and shrubs. 4 existing overstory trees will be removed, and there is no possibility for ever establishing shade trees on this site. In summary, this application may meet a minimum standard for adequate open space, but I believe it does not meet the PD purpose of encouraging development that is sensitive to environmental considerations. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
Liebel is next, followed by Terry Cohn.
Hello?
Yep, you are unmuted.
Okay, thank you. Commission members and Alder, my name is Tom Liebel. I live at 2139 Linden Avenue, about a half a block from the church site. When I was first made aware of this proposal, it seemed such an obvious case of an inappropriate project attempting to wedge into our small neighborhood that I quickly registered my wholesale opposition and felt no obligation to have any future engagement with it until now. Our neighborhood is bounded not by lakes or parks, but by arterial streets and railroad corridors. This creates openings for development pressure from many sides. We've seen it in the past and will no doubt have to deal with it again in the future. In no meaningful or statutory way does the Zion parcel qualify for the consideration as a planned development site. This is not some problematic or unique parcel. Only along part of its rear lot line does it even border commercial land use. This 1/2 acre constitutes a significant part of our neighborhood. Justified by the many reasons outlined in the letter that I submitted along with 20 of my neighbors, The entire proposal should be rejected out of hand by this body. Revision and resubmittal will not resolve its fundamental flaws. The current comprehensive zoning rules and boundaries reflect a community-based decision-making process that clearly applies to this site. The recently revised TRV1 zoning provides the template that will ensure that the unique character and livability of our small neighborhood is maintained for everyone to enjoy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Terry Cohn is next, and our last speaker is Madeline Gotkowitz.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Hello, and thank you, members of the commission. I live at 2135 Linden Avenue and will address a couple points from the letter that I helped write, signed by 20 neighbors. As stated in Ordinance 28.098 for a planned development district, Section 1, Statement of Purpose, quote, "The planned development district is established to provide a voluntary regulatory framework as a means to facilitate the unique development of land in an integrated and innovative fashion. Because substantial flexibility is permitted in the base zoning districts, the PD option should rarely be used. It is intended that applicants use the PD option only for situations where none of the base zoning districts address the type of development or site planning proposed," unquote. The application has not demonstrated anything unique about this project and therefore does not meet the purpose of a PD. This is not a unique lot. This is a typical zoning compliant lot that could be sensitively developed under its current zoning with increased housing density. It does not meet objectives B, C, E, F in the ordinance 28.098 section 1. It's not representative of any of the stated examples in the ordinance, which include, quote, redevelopment, large-scale master plan developments, projects that create exceptional employment or economic development opportunities, or developments that include a variety of residential, commercial, and employment uses in a functionally integrated mixed-use setting. I only have time to mention one of the approval standards for the project in Ordinance 28.098, Section 2, letter C. Quote, "The PD district plan shall not adversely affect the economic health of the city or the area of the city where the development is proposed," end quote. A vibrant and economically strong neighborhood has cohesion, both visually and socially. This project will impact negatively on the adjacent neighbors and neighborhood by introducing 40 or so residents who will have zero contact with their neighbors due to the configuration of the building and the site plan. I note that it is architecturally incongruent with every other residential structure in the area. It will dramatically increase traffic, but contribute almost no per capita park space and diminishes the historic residential integrity and character of the neighborhood. There will be a precedent for inappropriate development on residential streets, which will have a negative economic impact on the area. And in summary, this project does not meet the fundamental purpose and standards for a PD. A PD cannot and should not be a catch-all for the purpose of increasing density because the developer wishes to increase the number of units for greater financial gain. This proposal is neither harmonious with nor complementary to the visual standards of the adjacent residential neighborhood, and it is therefore a flawed and non-compliant application. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madeline, you are unmuted.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, members of the commission, for holding this hearing. My name is Madeline Gotkowitz. I own and live at 243 Division Street in a two-flat that is about 26 feet from the church. My comments address the scale and massing of the proposed building. I will support development of the church property when the development that's proposed is consistent with the scale of existing buildings. I do not support the current proposal. Please view the new Marling building and the houses opposite along East Main Street. The Marling provides a lovely example of new development amidst older residential housing at appropriate scale. At the location of the Marling, East Main Street is approximately 32 feet wide. Across from the Marling, the south side of East Main Street is lined with older housing similar to that along Linden, Division, and Dunning Streets. However, Linden Street is approximately 25 feet wide, while Dunning and Division are about 28 feet wide. East Main Street is therefore 22% wider than Linden and 12% wider than Dunning and Division Streets. But the Marling is built with two-story townhomes on the East Main Street side with a large, definitely greater than 20 feet, step back to 3 stories. Compare this to the narrower setting along Linden, Division, and Dunning Streets, where the proposed step back on the 3rd floor is 6 to 10 feet. 6 feet is the span of my arms plus 5 inches. So let's call that a step back in name only. The proposed building is essentially a full 3 stories that would tower over my home and neighboring residences. The proposed building of 32 units won't solve the shortage of housing in the neighborhood, but it will move it in the right direction. So too, I would offer would a proposal to build 20 or 25 units with an appropriately scaled 3rd story step back. The current proposal for 32 units as laid out will darken the surrounding streets for the apparent purpose of essentially the greed of the church, as the congregation seeks to maximize the cash value of their property beyond what current zoning now allows. I challenge you all to consider that your decisions will affect my home forever. I bought my property in a residential neighborhood to avoid living in the shadow of large buildings, thinking at that time that the current zoning would be supported and honored by the city. Please consider the scale of this proposal relative to the beautiful and light-filled area of East Main at the Marling. An appropriately scaled development can be achieved at the Zion property with a step-back distance on the 3rd story that's in proportion to the narrow street dimensions. Although such a development would provide about 7 fewer housing units and would reduce the church's bank account, it would retain the character of the neighborhood. Please go visit East Main Street. In summary, I contend that 3 stories would be acceptable with a much larger step-back distance. The scale of the current proposal is out of line with the height.
If there are no more registrants, we will open it up to the commission for questions or comments. Rafiq.
Yeah, this is for information only, right?
Yes.
So I won't speak to condos versus apartments or any of that stuff because that's well above my pay grade. But in terms of the exterior design, when I first saw this project, I liked it. I thought it fit well within a residential neighborhood. It didn't initially look like a 3-story apartment building to me. And I don't know if we can pull up the renderings. Yeah. So this image right here, I like it a lot. My only comment or concern is the public entries. Those don't read as public entries, and I don't know if it's if the doors need side lights or if that needs to be a storefront system where it's open and you can tell there's a public entrance. But a single door just within an archway doesn't read as this is how I get into the building to me. It looks like some people are shaking their heads, so I might not be alone in that comment. But that's my only thing. Otherwise, I like the character of the building. I think going from a pitch roof system to this massing is appropriate, and I personally think it fits well within a residential building. It doesn't look too obtrusive or massive. And I do hate step backs. Everybody knows that on this commission. I think they don't really do much for big buildings, but this isn't a big building, and I think the step back is is appropriate. So I think it's a overall good design. I don't know what we can do about open space. It's an infill project, and you kind of get what you get. But I think their attempt at landscaping and creating some type of buffer from the street is okay.
Thank you. Well, I don't see any other hands. I guess I'll jump right in. Oh, I'm sorry. I do see more hands now. I won't jump in. Lois and then Tom.
Thank you. Yeah, I only raised my hand, Cliff, because I thought, oh man, I better beat him to the punch, right? So the setback doesn't look like it's adequate enough in order for this building to have kind of this layered effect. And I don't know if it's because the materials are the same materials that are kind of coming down on other parts of the building. So I have to say it doesn't read as a townhouse type building. It reads as one building that is trying to have these separate little identities marching along that in my mind aren't cohesive. They have a lot of different heights of roof lines, a lot of different articulation of the roof edge, but yet then you have the back, the third story part kind of dripping down in certain areas. So I think I'm seeing kind of too much and too small of an area. I do like the idea of having a townhouse look, but I think with that comes with more access to first floor apartments. I would expect to see more entrances marching along that facade as well. So Kevin, I think there are kind of too many materials, and there could be a little bit more of a cohesive repetition. And not saying that you can't have this many types, but maybe they are coming together, and you don't have that top third floor vocabulary, if so to speak, kind of coming down in between those areas, because it's not reading as a townhouse to me. I'd also like to see some trees in the front, and I think City Road was successful in planting some larger trees. I don't think they're going to be canopy trees, so to speak, but they're right in that easement area, and I think that really does help kind of buffer the scale of the building to the neighborhood at large. Last thing is a question. How are you heating and cooling? Is that third story a parapet wall with units on the roof, or what are we going to see as far as mechanical units?
Thank you for the question, Lois. We haven't worked out the mechanical systems for this exactly, but this project will have, our desire for this project is to have a central heating system so that there won't be individual units in each apartment. Just a more efficient central heating system is the initial desire.
And is there anything on the roof?
I can't say for sure, but we are looking at doing more of like a central heat pump type system.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. Now let's see, it would be Tom and then Shane.
Okay, thanks, Cliff. I would jump in right after Rafiq on that. My first impression was this was a very appropriate scale for a neighborhood. I was thinking if developers who had proposed this in our neighborhood, which is also small, single family residential, it would actually get a fairly strong acceptance because of its scale. It's the 2-story with the setback third floor works very well, I think. My only reaction was what I call the historic referencing, particularly of the double bracketing, sort of it's sort of like a Victorian Italianate detail. I don't know that I sort of like I just wonder whether it could even be streamlined slightly more by avoiding that historical reference, because the rest of the building is fairly traditional, modern, basically. And I think I would agree with the issue about the public doorways being a single door. It feels like it needs a little bit more. But those my basic reaction was this would be very acceptable in the Bay Creek neighborhood, I think, speaking for even folks who don't like big buildings. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Shane.
Yeah, thank you. I would agree. I think my initial reaction was the scale felt right. I think that streetscape and the rhythm you set up with landscape and building articulation is pretty nice. And I think to live across from this rather than, I guess not necessarily the church building so much, but the West End with a surface parking lot is a clear improvement, which I think leads me to the other point, is that the project is removing or replacing a significant piece of surface parking. And it appears to be handling stormwater and capturing and delaying the release of that stormwater, which is another benefit to the community. I like that. I think maybe a couple responses to Lois's points. I think the planting plan actually does have a handful of small scale trees tucked within the pockets of the building. So I'm seeing a serviceberry, a larger dogwood, I think maybe even a musclewood at the corner. So I think these are like absolutely the right scale and type of selection for trees in that space. And it might not necessarily come through in the 3D perspective renderings, but I do think they're there and I like them. Let's see. One question I had was with the south driveway, are kind of headed down towards Atwood. Are people kind of walking back here, or is there any sort of access point on that south side? Just making sure, obviously the lighting's right, but also that if there is any sort of access point, that it's intuitive and safe. And I think also, maybe Lois, to your point, when just a gut reaction when I first saw it, I liked the scale and the rhythm of the building, but and I'm okay with the step back, but the step back roof line where it hits the sky felt like just kind of a long continuous. There's a little bit of in and out, but it's really shallow. So I personally felt like if there was a little bit more in and out on that upper line, because it is just like the longest line. And for me, that's where you start to read it as like one big apartment building, that a little in and out would help that perception. And I'll also just throw out there, initially I wasn't a huge fan of the blue and red together and just kind of that contrast. It's not a strong opinion. Maybe a different color brick would suit my taste better. I think it's better than just kind of all beige or all neutral, but the blue and red was maybe just a little jarring for my personal taste. That's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Shane. Since I doesn't look like I have the ability to raise my hand, so I'm going to just jump in here before Russell and Jessica and try to push back a little bit more on the applicant in terms of the building imagery. I mean, you did show some design proposals that went from a pretty interesting contemporary expression, then toward a city row, as you called it, and now these so-called traditional options that you had. And we're seeing building technology changes and advancements. We see building materials and systems improve, energy efficiency improves. And then we look at this and we have an overall design and detailing that emulates something that are design cues from 100 years ago. I mean, all these brackets and, and all these bays and craftsman windows and everything. You look at the back of the building, it's one building. So, I think maybe Lois was getting at it. I mean, this is a building and it should have an overall expression, a cohesive overall expression. It's a concept album. It's not a greatest hits album, So, and I know you've got all these details and everything you've used on buildings and very successfully in some instances. But here it is, I think, and even it may have been expressed as a design that was built through consensus, and it kind of looks that way. So I hope my fellow commissioners agree with me that there's a lot that can be done to make this a building that looks like it belongs in the 21st century. I do also have concerns about the PD standards that some of the neighborhood folks who spoke brought to us, and I'll let Kevin jump in if I'm getting stepping over our bounds. But we do have to consider the PD standards, and I believe that the PD standards aren't there just because the underlying zoning inconveniently doesn't fit the proposed design and the density of the development. And I know that the present zoning, I think, calls for about 500 square feet of open space, usable open space per dwelling unit, and we've got about a fifth of that. So, I think that it is under our purview to review this project under the PD standards, and I think of all the public comment, the concern for usable open space is the one that I share, I guess, most personally. Let's see. We'll go back to Shane, and we'll go later. Are you wanting to repeat or add something, Shane?
No, sorry, I just
No?
didn't put my
Okay.
hand
So
up.
we'll go then to Russell and then to Jessica. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I'll just quickly, I just to keep for time, I just second the concern about when we were asked to comment on usable open space. I tend to agree with the other commissioners' comments that the scale and massing might be appropriate or comfortable for a residential location, given other developments in the city, like they spoke to very well. I will, however, question and maybe push back on, is it appropriate for this particular site and the given space that this site affords this project? So I would also just second the do we have an appropriate amount of open space? Question for the development team. The driveway, is there any? It doesn't appear that anything is being changed to the shared drive. It's basically we're able to repurpose the existing drive for the new drive function. Is that all true?
Yes, that is true. We are utilizing it in its existing condition at the grades that it's currently at.
Could you speak to the need for the drive being as wide as it is?
It may visually present itself as wide, but in reality, it is not very wide. It's a two-way traffic pattern there, so we need to maintain distance.
You feel it's appropriate. You feel the width of the drive is what's needed. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I just wanted to state, it is a benefit to this project and this site that it's a share. I think you've greased the skids on the appropriate sort of working relationships to share that drive and everything, and not having to get another drive put in because the sites didn't work together. I think this is a benefit to this project. One other a question for Kevin, maybe Cliff. I don't believe we were presented with those other building design options from the applicant, but I don't believe we received that documentation. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. I did not see it in our packet of information.
I would just second the comment that, I mean, some of those other buildings just flashed in front of us did have some appeal. And I understand that there's a working session and some consensus building was done. But it's a little unfortunate that, we just got a little taste of maybe some other options. And anyway, that's my, I think those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Well, this commission does have to give an advisory recommendation to the Plan Commission. So the neighbors' input is important as they develop their design, but ours is required. Jessica.
Yeah, I'll start with that church is one of the cooler structures in town, and I just want to say I'm a little bummed that's going, that roof. Anyway, it's kind of iconic. One thing I wanted to ask about was there's a slope going from Linden back to Division, I believe, and the renderings show the building on Linden low down at a human scale, and it feels appropriate, but when you flip over to Division, they're raised, the first floor is raised up halfway up the house next to it. I don't know what the answer is on that, but it feels very different on Division Street. It feels really close to the street with a very steep rise in front of it. That maybe could take a little bit of attention. Yeah, that. Because everywhere else you're very, the scale of work walking along that street, which sounds like, and I feel it is important to this neighborhood, how that feels. It's very different, I think, on Linden versus Division and how it's meeting the street. I think you're probably going up high there instead of stepping down with the road to accommodate the parking underneath. But just thought maybe that could use some attention. My third question is, what happened to the passive house idea or standards? Can I ask that question at this point?
What was the question?
What happened to the idea of passive house standards?
Hey, can I speak to that, Jessica?
I'd love it. We have to ask Cliff.
I just didn't understand the question, but I would direct that yes to the developer.
Okay.
So initially we had at the last kind of meeting with the neighborhood proposed option A, which was passive house, and an option B, which we thought was too small for us to do passive house in a feasible way. We've since decided just to go ahead with passive house regardless. Doesn't make sense for us economically, but it's part of a larger vision to learn how to do passive house. So we're committed to meeting passive house standards on this building. The design is not make it easy. It's going to be very hard, but we've got the same passive house consultant that's doing the Bayview Community Center working with us on it. So that's our intention.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Russell?
Thank you for asking that question, Jessica. And I just want to, a strong vote or a commendation to, that I think a pursuit like that achieves some of the PD standard notions that I think a lot of us and a lot of the neighbors are concerned with regard to why is this project special? What's unique about it, and how is it benefiting the city and the neighbors? I just wanted to ask, because you mentioned it. It sounds like a decision's been made to pursue that level of building quality, if you will. And you mentioned that it's difficult with the current proposed design. Are you considering at all changes to this design in terms of the articulation of this building in order to achieve that? Or could you forewarn us maybe what some of those changes might be, or are no changes planned? Is where I'm going with this.
I can speak for the developer. Maybe Kevin, you can chime in. What makes it difficult is the step back. Generally in passive house, you want to keep it as simple as possible. So you get boxy structures, which makes the air barrier much easier to attain. But this is a compromise. We're trying to meet neighborhood architectural desires and scale desires, which got us the step back, which you would never start with if you were going for a passive house design. We're open to modifying the design in ways that meet our commitments to the neighborhood, that make the passive house easier. So if people have suggestions, that's what we're exploring right now.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I would just say briefly that we didn't get a lot of details on those other designs, but certainly there are opportunities to achieve potentially what you might call a more contemporary design, and yet a simplification or an elegance to the building articulation that could be a win-win, potentially. I mean, we've seen other passive house, hopeful passive house buildings that have come before this commission that, yes, maybe the massing was, you might call it, more simple, but I wouldn't think anybody would say it was displeasing. So thank you for the answer, and I think that's all for me for now.
Thank you for the input.
Shane.
Thanks. I'm still scratching my head a little bit on the open space topic. I'm not sure if my understanding is with the PD, you're kind of establishing your own requirements, but if we're framing the context of the conversation here on the current zoning and sort of comparing to the open space requirements of that, because I just don't want to send the wrong message. I think I'm personally not interested in a proposal that's creating more yard space and less density to do it. I don't think that's really appropriate for an infill opportunity like this. If it meant more porches, I think that would be beneficial. And maybe coming back to Lois's earlier comment, and balcony space, and I'm not exactly sure like how that computates or factors into the open space requirement offhand, but I don't think this project needs a little pocket park or at grade open space to make it successful. It seems like there's other small neighborhood parks in the area. There's the bike path, there's other opportunities for getting outside, and to sacrifice density for some sort of token gesture of usable outdoor space seems inappropriate.
I'll ask Kevin to jump in, because my comments were that my understanding is to go to a PD is not just because the underlying zoning doesn't happen to work for you.
As far as the open space standard, if this project does move forward under PD or planned development zoning, there is no minimum lot, or I'm sorry, open space requirement as there would be in conventional zoning districts. However, in the planned development standards, there are standards that relate to open space, and this is noted in the staff report. But if you look at planned development standard F, it states the PD district plan shall include open space suitable to the type and character of development proposed, including for projects with residential components, a mix of structured natural spaces for use by residents and visitors. Areas for stormwater management, parking, or in the public right of way shall not be used to satisfy this requirement. So it's a subjective finding that would need to be made that the open space is adequate based on that would be the finding. Ultimately, the Common Council will need to make based on the recommendation from UDC and the formal recommendation from the Plan Commission.
And so, Kevin, it's not really up to us to, I guess, to make a determination whether the PD is appropriate for this site, but just that it meets the PD standards.
As far as the UDC's role in the plan development review process is defined, and it says that your role is, as the UDC, is to I'm reading it from the code right here, just so we're all on the same page. And it says the commission will review the concept in reference to the objectives listed in section 28.0981 and the other requirements of this subchapter. And so that's what your advisory on. Those objectives do include the appropriateness. Ultimately, the Common Council would need to make that finding. But as it relates to, as it relates to those objectives, if and when this is back for the commission for a formal review, commission could comment on any of those objectives.
Okay. Thank you. Lois?
Yeah, I just wanted to step back to the passive subject and then back to what you said, Cliff, about modern building systems and materials. And I will challenge the design team and the developer team to, if, form follows function, if you want to do something that is ecologically friendly, highly efficient, and really a building for future Madison, I would challenge you to start thinking in those terms. And a modern building doesn't have to look commercial or cold or not have any, green space or anything. I think you can take all of those components and make a very pedestrian friendly, neighborhood friendly building. And you could even use maybe the geometries of a repetitive nature, so it has that townhouse-like, feel, as far as each area has its own maybe entrance or something. But I would challenge you to try to marry some of these 21st century building systems, do the passive thing, make this an energy efficient building of the 21st century, and still make it respectful and scale and detail to the neighborhood. I think it's kind of like you took a lot of things and tried to, like Cliff mentioned, consensus designing. And I think that's kind of probably where you got off track to your main objectives. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin.
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify, as I was looking at this section, there was just one other reference, and just for the benefit of the commission, there is also another statement when it talks about the commission's formal review of the two different components of plan development zoning. That's the general development and the specific implementation plans. And what that section, it does reference back to the same objectives that I mentioned before. And it does say that the, bear with me one second, that the Urban Design Commission shall review prior to the Plan Commission and make a recommendation to the Commission with specific findings on the design objectives listed within those objectives in 28.098 and the other sub-requirements of this chapter. So if this is before the body formally submitted for a formal recommendation, that will certainly be outlined in the staff report.
Thank you. I think the concern I know that I have is under the approval standards 28.0982A, where it says plan development shall not be allowed simply for the purpose of increasing overall density or allowing development that otherwise cannot be approved unless the development also needs one of the standards other conditions, and I guess it says steep topography, unusual features, or an infill site that couldn't reasonably be developed under the base zoning. So that is the one that I'm having I personally support all the density and height there, but I have a concern about rezoning for the purposes of this particular development, given the fact that I think the geometry of the site and its topography could support a project under the base zoning. And I'm sure the Plan Commission will have to make the ultimate decision on that, but I guess I would ask my commissioners fellow commissioners to think about that when it comes around next time for an action by this commission, that we give the Plan Commission a motion that addresses the increased density, and our feeling that whether we believe or we disbelieve that a project could be successful under the base zoning. Rafiq.
Yeah, you answered my first question about we don't have to make that determination today because this is just for information.
Right.
My second comment was about the historic versus contemporary feel of the building. I feel like most times we are at opposite ends of the spectrum. I'm always pushing for contemporary and everybody else is like, no more. They wanted to look and blend in, and now that it's blending in with the neighborhood, people are talking about contemporary, and I'm just like, what's happening here? But I think Russell or even you, Cliff, might have mentioned it. The images that we saw in part 2 or the addendum or supplement to this presentation were very intriguing. They were very small, but they were intriguing, and it would be great to see some of those design moves kind of implied or applied to this, if that's the way that they want to go. And I don't, that's what I struggle with, because now that it's, in my opinion, fitting in, we're looking for some contemporariness or some modernism to be applied, which is great for me, but I don't know that it would actually match the character of the neighborhood, which is fine, because I don't think buildings built in 2022 need to look like they were built in 1900. That's just going backwards, in my opinion. So I think if the design team and the development team are going back to the drawing board to make some revisions, maybe getting rid of some of that historic ornamentation and bracketing and some of those added fenestrations might help. I think a lot of times developers tend to go with what they know, and they use familiar materials. Hardy board is not the only siding out there. There's many other contemporary sidings that might help bring this building, and especially do some of the things you're looking for from sustainability standpoints. I like the massing. I do like the massing. I don't think all sides of the building need to look the same. I think the side on the drive out can be dumbed down as it is right now. But I do think that some of the materiality can enhance this project moving forward. I don't think it's bad now, but I think it can be a little bit better looking at some of those things without completely remassing the building.
Thank you. And style aside, I think it lacks a cohesive design statement. The back to the front. Those the third story, Rafiq, how it completely sort of belies the fact that it's a big building versus where the first 2 stories might have, here's a red brick, here's a blue siding, here's a bit of buff, but above on the 3rd floor, it just gives it all away because it's all just hardy board up there, and then you've got something completely different on the back or on the south side, which it shouldn't be the back, because it's not the back yard or the back windows of somebody's apartment. It's a front face for whoever is living on that side. So I don't want to get, that's my personal preference on the style, but really it's about having a cohesive design, and how I believe that the contemporary and the city row options that we saw that were sort of dismissed had that kind of real interesting design of units in series, but also brought a cohesive design, to the public face or the public street. Russell.
Thank you. One more comment. If the development team considers and truly pursues a deeper kind of look at the achieving a passive house performance of this building, it's not a very big step from that point to go toward something like net zero energy. And this gets into the gray area of this particular commission, but there's certainly a roof opportunity there for solar panels and making this building also generate some of its own energy, which is obviously a great feature and benefit to the neighborhood. Certainly would have support from me to look at something like that. So just a recommendation to look into that if you consider to go where you think you might be going. Thank you.
Okay. This is an informational presentation, so we certainly do want to let the applicant know what's most important to us and what's on our mind, so they have the best shot at a successful project when they come back. So are there any more questions or comments? Nope. Oh, Christian, go ahead. Not unmuted yet. Not yet. See if I can try. There you go.
Okay, I had a question, technical question about the parking arrangement in the basement. I didn't see any details, and I suppose the architects are probably familiar with this, but I'm not. What is the stacked parking? How does that work? I was curious about that. There was no details given.
This is Kevin Burrow. The arrangement that we are intending to utilize here is it's a motorized rack, basically, but single stall only. It's not intertwined to any neighboring stalls, so that you can pull a vehicle in and then raise it up and then park your second vehicle underneath it. We have not determined the exact manufacturer for this or the configuration. The other option would be to pull a vehicle in and then lower it below and set another vehicle on top. We just have to determine how much headroom will be required.
Okay. Just a few other comments. I think the overall look of the building, particularly on Linden, is a pretty handsome design. I mean, I read all of the comments and listened to all the comments from the neighbors, and there's going to be varying opinions, but I look at this particular view or any of the other ones looking down this street, and I think this is a handsome development. And as always on these type of things, especially when it concerns views of the quote unquote back of the building or these third stories with the step backs, is I think we need to be realistic about where we're where our sight lines are, where people are actually viewing these from, and sort of take that into account. These snapshots are one static point in one particular place, and I think sometimes there's too much emphasis put on them and sometimes not enough. But these views here looking down, I think, as a transitional from a bigger apartment building next door, that cornerstone, to an area with single family homes, I consider this to be a reasonable compromise. I share the feelings of some of the neighbors that I think it's sad that these are not owner occupied and that they're apartments, but that's not the UDC's really bone to pick. but I think they do a pretty nice job of making these look like individual units. I know sometimes we seem to get hung up on too many different materials and colors, but I think in this case, these serve a really excellent purpose of making these seem more like individual living units. And you know, the particular decorative elements, I find them, you know, I don't know enough about historical architecture to, you know, lay a title on what this is neo whatever, but I find them fairly understated and I think would be palatable to most most of the average citizenry, that this is a handsome design. As far as trees and such, I would like to see maybe some more, especially columnar varieties tucked into some of these spaces where a tree with a normal spreading canopy might not fit. And I would also imagine that the city is going to get involved and possibly be putting trees on the median between the sidewalk and the street. So perhaps that would allay some of the concerns of the neighbors that we don't have enough trees. I'm certainly pro trees, but there just isn't a whole lot of space for them on the footprint of this building. It seems to me they went a long way towards trying to minimize the parking and traffic issues, which are a problem in this neighborhood. I used to live in this neighborhood, and I know the issues involved with that, but keeping it all down one existing alleyway, and it sounded like they are talking about not letting people turn left out of that, but forcing them to turn right and down onto Atwood is going to go a long way. And the ratio of the parking is pretty high compared to what we've seen for some of the other ones. So it seems like there shouldn't be a ton of on-street parking involved with the residents from this. But all in all, concerns about you know, the appropriateness of this type of you know, building on here, and whether it should be owner or rental and the number of units. The general look and design of it, I think is very nice and would be welcomed, as Tom said, in a lot of neighborhoods. And just a comment to Jessica, you like the church there, and I'm usually pro-church, and I like the variety of church architecture, but every time I went by this, all I could ever think about was it looks exactly like the salt barns down on the Chicago Turnpike. So I'd have to disagree with you on that. I'm sorry. That's all.
Maybe it was the same architect. There, if you and I know they are in the terrace, they are proposing to keep on Linden Street some Kentucky coffee trees and honey locusts and other trees. And I can't remember if they're mature or not, but at least that's the intent. I would say that, you know, because of the rendering and so forth, I think the trees would sort of block the image that we're seeing here. So I think that the shade lines, the tree and shady street will be maintained. Okay, any other questions or comments? Nope. All right. That takes care of item number 3. And item 3 is our last item, other than, let's see, what did we have here? Secretary's report.
Sure. All right, I do have a couple of just small things to go over relatively quickly. First, commission appointments. We have some good news and some bad news there. The good news is that as of last week, Russell was appointed full-time by council to serve on the commission. So welcome, greetings, Russell. I'm looking forward to working with you as you continue your service. The bad news, of course, means that we lost Craig. So somewhere out there, I'll send Craig some sincere thank yous if he's listening tonight for his service. With that in mind, though, too, that does also mean that we need an alternate. If you guys have any recommendations or know of interested parties and want to forward contact information to me, I'm happy to reach out to them, or if they want to reach out to me directly, feel free to pass on my information. We can move forward in that direction. Also, what I would like to start doing tonight and in the future is kind of running down a list of projects that Plan Commission has taken action on, but that UDC has also either acted in an advisory role or as an approving body. And tonight we have a couple of applications that Plan Commission did take recent action on. Real quick, most of them are plan developments, 5817 Haley Way, 5818 Gemini Drive, 1824 South Park Street, 702 North Midvale, and 401 North Sego. And then finally, a project that I'm familiar with, the Verve. With that one of note, the Plan Commission did approve UDC's condition regarding the modifications to the West Tower and the specifications on the walk-up units, noting that they could either be on Johnson or on Bassett Street. So we will see that one back probably some point for final approval. And I'd have to rely on Kevin for any sort of additional background on the other projects. I just quickly put together a list from what I could gather. But that's all I have for the commission this evening. Sorry, my lights look to be glaring at you guys.
Yeah, if you put your head in front of the light source, it helps.
Do I have a halo? I should take
Yeah.
a snapshot and send it to my mom.
Okay. She's not watching?
No.
Oh, neither's mine.
Oh.
I think back to the commission members and the membership, we should schedule a time in one of our upcoming meetings to elect commission officers, that is the chair and the vice chair. I think we're overdue for that. I don't think we've done it in a couple of years. So perhaps we put that on a future agenda that doesn't have too much on it, and it would give people time to campaign. Let's
Noted.
see.
I will add that to a future agenda.
Okay. We just so you know, Jess, we deliberately held off on doing that. First of all, so that we knew that you were coming on board in the near future, and now you're here. And also, we knew that Russell had an interest on being a full voting member, and so we figured we would just wait until that officially happens, so that he has an opportunity to be nominated as a chair or vice chair. And let's see, so that was any other business by members? Other considerations for future agenda? Other than maybe Rafiq wants to keep them short like tonight, right? We filled up the time anyway. Okay, all right. Seeing no other comments or questions, then it's 5:55, and by unanimous consent, we are adjourned. Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.